I'm Paulie at Toronto Tech Week, and now here's a special edition of
Listening to Still Processing with Alfred and Sarah.
Alfred and Sarah.
Picture this. You're at Toronto Tech Week, right in the heart of the Mars Discovery District. I've walked past this building 100 times, but this morning felt different. I'm finishing a master's in computer engineering with a focus on AI safety and agentic alignment. So when a room full of investors starts debating what's real versus what's hype in AI, I'm not just curious. I'm taking notes for professional reasons. Today, we're bringing you a dispatch straight from the floor of the Mars Live Lounge.
And I'm Sarah, a Cambridge graduate with a joint master's in linguistics and psychology, specializing in cognitive science and human-computer interaction. So when the conversation turns to how humans actually understand, trust, and misread AI systems, that's rather my territory. We brought notebooks, open ears, and what Professor Thorn calls a tricorder, the habit of listening, not just to what's being said, but to what's underneath it. And today, we're unpacking what we heard and what we're still processing.
We'll dig into the panel's core message about usefulness versus coolness, share what we overheard from a founder grappling with dirty data, explore the idea of digital sovereignty, and probe who actually gets to decide which innovations count.
So buckle up. This episode is a dispatch from the front lines. And by the end, you'll have a fresh perspective on what's really happening beneath the surface of AI innovation in Canada. Brilliant or dodgy, we'll let you decide.
Listening to Still Processing with Alfred and Sarah.
What struck me most was a panelist's warning. Don't build for coolness alone. It's tempting, especially in the AI world, to chase the wow factor, but usefulness is what survives. From an AI safety perspective, that's not just good business advice. It's a systems principle. Cool without useful is just technical debt with better marketing.
I absolutely get that. Every time someone launches a flashy AI demo, the excitement is real, but 6 months later, only the tools that actually help people stick around. And from a linguistic standpoint, there's something telling about the word cool itself. It's purely social. It's about how something lands in a room. Usefulness is about what happens after you leave the room.
Funny thing is, everyone nods along until you realize how much energy goes into showy demos instead of practical solutions. In my field, we call it yak shaving. You spend so long making the thing look impressive that you never actually ship the thing. The friction of real work is where usefulness shines.
And that friction isn't glamorous. It's the hassles of integrating AI into actual workflows, the headaches of data verification, and the patience required to build something people genuinely depend on. That's knackering work, but it's the only work that lasts.
One panelist admitted that predicting the next wave in AI is almost impossible even for investors whose jobs depend on it, which, honestly, LGTM as an admission. The whole room settled into this theme: agility, fluidity, resilience, not as solutions, as survival skills.
That resonated deeply with me. It felt ancient, actually properly old, not venture capital old. Professor Thorn had been reading the Tao Te Ching that morning before the session, and the advice from the stage, stop trying to freeze the river, learn to move with it, could have come straight from chapter 16. There's a difference though. The room was describing frantic agility sprinting to keep up with every new model release. What Professor Thorn was reading about is something quieter, sovereign fluidity, anchored in something that doesn't change. The first is exhausting. The second is a foundation.
It's a huge shift, less about locking down certainty and more about building systems and teams that can flex and adapt. I grew up in a household where my parents built something new in a new country, and the one thing they understood instinctively was that the foundation matters. Who owns it, who maintains it, who can change the terms. Being ready for change is the real superpower, but only if the foundation holds.
And you can see how this mindset trickled through the whole morning. Whether it was investors or founders, everyone was trying to figure out how to survive in a world that won't stand still. What struck me is that nobody mentioned wisdom. Everyone mentioned speed. Those are not the same thing.
Stepping out into the hallway, the conversation shifted completely. Over coffee, two people, one in telecom, one in government services, independently brought up digital sovereignty, not as a slogan, as a genuine, unresolved concern. And I found it telling that they arrived at the same word without prompting. That's not a talking point. That's a signal.
That question, when our infrastructure is built on platforms owned elsewhere, what do we actually control, was buzzing in my head all morning. Inside the room, it was all momentum and scaling. Outside, it was about ownership and independence. Both conversations were happening simultaneously. Only one had a microphone.
Our tricorder Professor Thorn's word for this kind of deep listening picked up that tension all morning. The official narrative was big and ambitious. The hallway narrative was more cautious, asking whose infrastructure actually underpins all this confidence.
And that tension is everywhere, isn't it? The story that gets amplified is about building and winning. But the quieter questions about sovereignty, control, dependency are just as urgent, possibly more so. They just don't fit on a slide deck.
Before the session started, we overheard a founder on a video call nearby. Not performing, just working. Genuinely cheesed off with his team. The problem? Dirty data. People feeding AI outputs directly into client decks without checking them. Classic garbage in, garbage out. Except the garbage was wearing a very confident face.
That moment felt more real than anything said from the stage. The daily grind of checking AI-generated results, closing the loop, keeping judgment human, it's messy and unglamorous. But it named the actual texture of the work. And it made me think about how much psychological trust we extend to these tools, just because they sound fluent. Fluency is not accuracy. A system can be linguistically impeccable and factually wrong. That's my entire field in one sentence.
The promise of AI is speed and automation, but what actually matters is accuracy and accountability. If your moat is made of someone else's water, if your competitive advantage depends entirely on someone else's infrastructure, improving on someone else's timeline, you're not building a moat. You're building a dependency. Clean data and human verification aren't optional extras. They're the actual architecture. Skip them, and you've got spaghetti code underneath a very polished interface.
Exactly. The tool might be fast, but human oversight is still the backbone. It's a reminder that the work hasn't disappeared. If anything, it's become more important. The job of checking, verifying, thinking critically, that's the job that didn't disappear when AI arrived. That's the job that matters more now than ever.
What stood out was how institutional gatekeepers reacted to unexpected innovation. When someone described a small, independent, civically focused media studio using AI as creative collaborators, the term synthetic correspondence made an institutional leader pause. The air shifted. The category she implied didn't have a file yet. And I thought, this is the oldest yak shaving in the book. You can't get to the actual work. Because first, you have to justify the existence of the work to someone whose job is to protect the existing categories of work.
It wasn't hostility, just a lack of precedent. And what gutted me about that moment, genuinely gutted me, is that it connected directly back to everything we'd been hearing all morning about sovereignty. It's not just whose infrastructure, it's whose voice, whose category, whose language gets to count as legitimate. I've navigated that question my whole life, in Tanzania, in the UK, here in Canada. The technology changes, the structure of the question doesn't.
That connects right back to digital sovereignty. Who owns the infrastructure and who owns the voice? The room spent 2 hours celebrating the solo founder, the one-person startup, the individual who bets everything on something new. The hallway reminded us that disruption has a dress code. The pre-approved kind gets applause. The kind that arrives without a category still has to fight for its right to exist.
The innovation that fits a pitch deck gets applause. The one that doesn't gets a raised eyebrow and some well-meaning advice about phrasing. Even in a building whose entire purpose is to say that new things are welcome. That gap is not empty, though. It's full of quiet, sovereign work being done by people who aren't waiting for permission.
So what are we taking back to the lab? Not a tidy list. More like a set of open questions we can't stop thinking about. The difference between riding a wave and building something that survives when the wave changes. What verification and clean data actually mean when AI is woven into every layer of decision-making. and why the word sovereignty kept surfacing from the hallway, from the stage, from the moment the air shifted when someone described work that didn't have a category. Yet,
If there's one thing this morning confirmed, it's that the questions worth asking are usually the ones waiting in the hallway. Not on the slides, not in the official narrative, in the quieter conversations, over coffee, between people who haven't been handed a microphone yet. Ask whose AI, ask whose infrastructure, ask whose voice, and then listen properly, for what's underneath the answer. I'm Sarah. Cheers.
and I'm Alfred. We're still processing. The tricorder is still on. This has been a dispatch from the Mars Discovery District during Toronto Tech Week 2026.
You've been listening to Still Processing with Alfred and Sarah. We'll keep
Alfred
making.
and Sarah. Keep making.